Darktide has just fully launched and it's time to crack into that unending tide of poxwalkers. If you're a veteran of the Tide series or are just jumping in for the first time with the Gamepass, there is a definite learning curve to the game. In this video, I want to step you through a lot of the game to help you out in getting started for the first time. I'll be giving you a breakdown of each class, some crucial options to change before you get started, how the combat system works, show some information on items, and then just some general tips beyond the beginner stages of the game. Now, I've been playing since before the pre-order beta with the special early access build, and some of the shots I show on screen might be from that build just in case some things look off. The UI is entirely different on the launch build, so I just want to kind of clarify that in case you look at it and go, well, why doesn't mine look like that? You can quickly navigate to each subject that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And if you end up enjoying the video, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I cannot tell you how much that helps out any content creator you watch. And I'll be covering a ton of Darktide content with a lot of build, weapon, and general gameplay guides, all coming out in the next couple weeks or so. I'll also be streaming on Twitch with the same username I have here on YouTube. Find that in the description. But let's get started with my beginner's guide for Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. This is the first thing you're going to see when you start your game up, and it is creating your first character. And you've got 4 classes to choose from, which I'm about to kind of break down for you. But it's just worth noting that anything in this screen has no bearance upon the game outside of fun, flavorful RPG conversation. So do not worry about creating your character and what options you take as far as their location, their planet, all that stuff. It doesn't matter at all. I just wanted to kind of quickly talk about this in case you got a lot of analysis paralysis choosing all the things. You might get some ideas of what the character does through here. That's really cool, and I'm going to go through it with you in just a little second here. The only thing I would kind of worry about with your character is your height, and it's going to be dependent upon the class that you choose, but again, this is really not that important. We're splitting hairs here. If you're playing an Ogryn, go as short as you can because it allows you to see anything underneath you a little bit easier. People can see over you a slight bit easier than if you are the tall, largest Goliath in the room. And even then, like I said, look at this. It's marginal. It's marginal. You're not really going to have that much of a change of gameplay. You're not going to think, man, I really should have gone with a short or tall Ogryn. I'm just trying to tell you from like a perspective that helps you out maybe the most. If you want this character, he's probably going to be easier to line up headshots with cleave attacks. Or if you're playing, say, a Psyker or a veteran, being taller kind of helps you get a little bit better line of sight on things. You can shoot stuff over things a little bit easier. Again, though, it's splitting hairs. Same thing here with the Zealot. Being anywhere between that average height to max height allows you to get a lot of good cleave damage in the head. But that's the only thing you can't really edit. And it's the only thing that has even the slightest bearance upon gameplay. And like I've said like 5 times now, it's splitting a hair. Just make the character however the hell you want. Now, to give you a real quick class breakdown here, we're going to give you a quick minute kind of overview of each character or class, and then I'm going to just jump into some more information about the game. But the veteran Sharpshooter is a range class. You're going to get access to stuff like the bolt gun, the multi-melta, a plasma gun, which is going to give you a lot of ranged firepower that can really nuke down specials and elites, and that's going to be your primary role, much like the Psyker, is trying to take care of those elites, especially snipers or scab and dread gunners, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and getting them out of play fast, because in the higher difficulties, they are really going to work against you. And the nice thing with the Sharpshooter is you get increased ammunition, and it allows you to really be able to pour on tons of range damage. So if you want to play that kind of Acadian veteran guardsman, then this is going to be the character for you. It's worth noting, though, that the veteran Sharpshooter is no slouch in melee combat. They get access to a power sword, which is a head chopping machine. They also get access to a chain axe. They can still do plenty of very, very, very fun and very enjoyable melee damage. The Zealot Preacher is your consummate melee class in the game, even more so than the Ogryn, which is going to be taking the majority of the fire. The Zealot Preacher is really good at running around, using their special to leap from location to location to kill enemy elites and specials. I'm sorry, they're activatable. It's my favorite class. I have the most fun playing it because using an Eviscerator, a 2-handed chainsword, to cut things in half is so enjoyable. You can use a thunder hammer to melt something's face quite literally off of their body. Like it just flences the flesh off of their face, and it's one of the coolest things. Now, again, even though this is a melee class, much like the Sharpshooter, you are still not bad at the opposite thing of what you focus on. They can use a bolt gun, which makes them extremely well-rounded. They have a flamer, which gives them an incredible amount of wave clearing ability. Playing the Zealot Preacher, do not think you're going to be shoehorned into melee. You'll be able to play plenty of range, just not as well as, say, a veteran who has a far larger ammo pool and an activatable geared towards killing things at range. But you are going to be the melee powerhouse that can rip down monstrosities, specials, and elites very quickly using your activatable and the active ability on your chain weapons or your power weapons. The Psyker. Now, this class is very interesting. You're really potent at range from your brain burst ability because you can just outright kill most specials and elites, unless you're talking about the Ogryns, which are going to require 2, maybe 3 charges of your special brain burst ability. In lieu of a grenade, they have this ability, brain burst, where they simply target things, charge up, and blow their brain out. Literally, it's exactly the word brain burst is what it does. And this is a really fun class because you're activatable, or will also just push things away or light them on fire. You get a staff that'll either shoot lightning like Palpatine, or become a flamethrower, or use kinetic force to explode waves. You get a force sword that you can charge up and blow things up with. It is an extremely diverse, very fun class that can pour out a ton of damage. You have the ability to be very versatile in doing a lot of wave clear or focusing down specials and elites and just, well, bursting their head. But they are very much a glass cannon. The Preacher, even though it's a melee character, has the ability to kind of be very tanky, while the Psyker doesn't really have anything in melee that can really just kind of keep it alive. So you have to make sure you are brain bursting things, that you are pushing things away, and you are also using your stat to the best of its ability. I would say of the 4 classes, this is the most difficult because it requires the most micromanaging. It might not be the best first class for you because you might get very frustrated with the requirement of feats on this class for it to really start to take off. And I will say though, with all that being said, I could play difficulty 4 and difficulty 5 missions without a Preacher and be just fine. I cannot play difficulty 4 and difficulty 5 missions without a Psyker. It's one of the ones that takes the longest time to get off the ground, but once it does, you'll find that it is the most invaluable character to your party. So if you want to be the glass cannon that blows everything up, the Psyker is going to be the one for you. Then lastly, we have the Ogryn Skullbreaker. Now the Ogryn is in a funky spot because it's huge, and the game in difficulties 4 and 5 is really all about a lot of range damage, even in difficulty 3, to be totally honest with you. So your Ogryn is going to be very fun to push things down and out of the way in difficulties 1 and 2, using its Ripper gun to just destroy hordes, or the heavy stubber to rip through poxwalkers. But once you get that slab shield and you are just the stalwart guardian of your entire squad, it's where the Ogryn starts to shine. The Ogryn is a tank, but it more falls into a support tank role, being there to hold the line, mitigate damage, and get your bros up because of the passive ability that allows them to bring people up that have been downed without being interrupted. That's actually a huge perk and a huge advantage to playing the Ogryn. The Ogryn also has a lot of feats that can benefit the toughness regeneration of those around them, mitigate a lot of damage resistance against him. It's just the ultimate bro to hold the line. With that being said though too, you will have a little bit of a hard time in the higher difficulties as you learn to stay in cover, use line of sight to block things and force them to come to you. It is a class that you would think is very straightforward, which is simply putting a shield down and holding the line, but it really does require you navigating the game mechanics, the literal geography of the game, and moving things around so that you put yourself in the best position to defend your team, defend yourself from not dying while putting yourself in harm's way, and making it so that your Psykers, your Sharpshooters can take advantage from things from range, or your Preacher can stack up against you and reap things around you as they kind of crash upon your shield. So take all of those things into consideration, because the Ogryn is a very fun class, but it does require a little bit more brains than you would think, for the fact that it's an Ogryn, who's a very dim-witted person. But still, my point remains here that it is definitely a thinking man's tank. Moving into the game, let's have some fun with the options screen to kind of help you out with some things. Hello, Sylvania. Let's go into here to escape, go to options, and we're going to go into input. So the first thing you should turn on is stationary dodge. If you have this off, it's not a big deal, but when you have it on, if your character is not moving, if you're not putting an input front, left, whatever, and you just press spacebar, the character will dodge backward. And anytime you can get more dodging into the game, it's always a great thing. Key bindings, go through this as you see fit. We're going to touch on video in a little bit. I have a whole video plan for that. Interface, do whatever you want to do here, but a lot of people should probably turn their camera sway intensity down if they're getting motion sickness while playing. Audio, again, do whatever you want to do here. Now, moving into video, the big things that you want to touch on, this is really obviously going to be dependent upon you, your rig, your graphics card, all those things. But first off, regardless of all that, put your field of view up to at least 80 degrees. This is going to help out your left, right, top, and bottom. Being able to see more of the screen is going to help you out in getting an idea of what's trying to flank you. All that fun action. If you play it at default, you're just going to end up getting hit a little bit more than you probably should. Now, for performance, I have a pretty, to toot my own horn, a pretty impressive PC. I have a GTX 3080. I mean, it's not a Ti or a 3090, but I've got an i9 1200, whatever the fuck. And it's all pretty good stuff. But the game right now is not very well optimized as of the making of this video. So turn off NVIDIA DLSS. It's just not well optimized right now. Low latency, turn on if you want. Make sure you have a frame rate cap on there. I have a 144 hertz monitor, but this won't allow me to do it. So just go to the highest one you can do, and turn on Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2. That seems to be the best way to kind of get the most out of the game. And make sure you have sharpen on. It's just a really good way to get. Basically, with these 1, 2, and 3 options, you're changing the resolution constantly, and it sometimes causes a blur. Sharpen kind of makes that look a lot better. Don't touch ray tracing. Do not touch ray tracing. And I have global illumination on high. Turn off depth of field and turn off motion blur. Ambient occlusion and light quality, put these kind of at your own whim there. And turn down your ragdoll, weapon impact decals, max blood decals, and decal lifetime. Again, I have a whole video. It's going to be plan to talk about all these things, but this should help you get a little bit of FPS out in the very front end. I went from before touching all those up to 100%, or not, sorry, 100 frames per second. You can see in the upper left corner. This was at like 60, 70 if I was using NVIDIA's recommendation, and I think the game looks pretty good. It's got a good amount of bloom here. I like bloom. I'm one of those weirdos that does, but these are just some things you should be doing for your game right out the gate that are really going to help you out in either playing the game or getting the most out of your system and helping out with any kind of input problems. Moving into our section on combat, I want to go through our enemies first because they're going to be a big part of your game, and it's kind of nice to know about the individual nomenclature behind all of them. So you can see here we have our poxwalkers, just our simple poxwalkers. Then as we move over here, we have what look to be just like corrupted cultists of a sort. Sometimes they're called terrors, I'm not really sure, but these guys are not as important because you won't really be having to deal with them as much as you will what we're coming into. So now you have two distinctions here. You've got your scab on the left side, which looks more like a corrupted guardsman. And then you've got your dregs, which kind of just look like these dudes right here. And man, do they look great. Looking absolutely healthy, my dude. This guy, I think, kind of falls into the dreg category. And it's worth noting, too, that this guy has an auto gun. This guy has a shorter las gun. This guy has a longer las gun with a bayonet. And they're going to be the bane of your existence in harder difficulties. And they're way more durable than those two over there. Now we get into the elites. Now, the difference between an elite and a special, the specials are over there, is that an elite is already spawned into the game when you load in. You're going through a map, they're present, they're there, they're going to start shooting you and attacking you. They might spawn in a little bit, but they don't have like a special, or they might spawn in certain waves, but they're not part of a particular sound event. When you hear a special spawn in, like the hound, you'll hear a howling. When you hear the mutant, you'll hear a loud groaning and the dud of it running at you. There are a lot of sound cues that tell you that a special has spawned. Elites, they just spawn. They're there or they're already present on the map. And they'll come with the waves. So we have your Mauler covered in different pieces of armor. And we're going to talk about armor in a second. Your Dreg Gunner, remember that guy kind of fits the look of these dudes right here, and they're kind of bandage robes. And your Scab Gunner. Now this guy has a hot lasgun. That's not the actual term for it, but I just like calling it a hot lasgun. It's funner to me. And this guy will rapid fire you down versus this guy has a stubber. Maybe a stubber, not a heavy stubber. And he'll be just gunning you down. These two will suppress the hell out of you, and you'll want to kill them as fast as you can. But then you have your Crusher, which is a big Ogryn covered in armor. Your Bulwark, which is another Ogryn covered in armor. And then a Reaper with a heavy stubber who will be suppressing you just like the Gunners. So again, those are your elites. If you have any penances, any perks that say when you kill elites, it's talking about these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dudes right there. Now your specials, again, they're going to be adjoined with any kind of sound cue, for the exception of that guy. The Scab Sniper does not have a sound cue when he spawns in, but he will have a sound cue when he aims at you. And it's just a matter of dodging away from his red laser pointer that he has on his gun. But we have the Poxhound, the Dreg Tox Flamer, the Scab Flamer, the Scab Bomber, and which you really want to kill as fast as possible because they'll throw grenades that will zone you out. And their fire damage from their grenades is absolutely devastating on higher difficulties. Your Scab Trapper, which will lock you down and basically keep you in a net until someone frees you. And your Mutant, which is, I don't know if it's an Ogryn or not, but it's disgusting. And of course, lastly, just the Scab Sniper we talked about. So those are your specials that are going to be spawning into the game with sound cues. And lastly, we have a little bit more in the elite section, and these are your Dreg Ragers, which if you've played Vermintide 1 and 2, they match up exactly, almost animation and everything, with the Berserkers. They'll attack you unendingly. You just simply have to block or block push them. And your Scab Rager, which is the same thing, just with more armor on. Then behind them, the Scab Shotgunner and the Dreg Shotgunner. These guys will just take pot shots at you with their shotguns. But just wanted to quickly walk through all of the enemies so that you know which one's an elite, which one's a special, and who the hell they all are. Next up, let's have a conversation here about stamina. Now, stamina is a very important portion of the game. I'm going to hold down right click and you'll see I'll go into a blocking stance. Now, every single weapon has different stamina values. Maybe it'll actually add to your stamina. Maybe it'll detract from your stamina, whatever it is. Those little bars are your context clues. Certain weapons will have different stamina amounts. And that 100% is a percentage of that weapon's stamina, not your overall stamina. Like I said, it's different for every single weapon. And you can block, push, or block, push, swing. In your game, you will be doing a ton of that. And in the earliest portions of the game, you won't. In difficulties 1 and 2, it's not as crucial. But in 3 and 4, if you don't block push, you are just going to lose. I've said this before in another video, but the most important thing to remember about this game is it is not a game of killing everything. It is a game of crowd control and managing crowds so that you can kill them succinctly without dying or losing any health if at all possible. So when we go up to this horde, we pretty much always want to be pushing things like this. You can see I'm just kind of pushing them, and that's good because they can't do damage to me. They can't line up swings. They can't hurt me, and that's really important. Now, I'm just doing this by strafing, and a big way to really kind of stay alive is not by doing this while strafing, because you can see how much slower I move compared to left and right. Pull down that block, I move much slower now, right? And stuff like your mobility and stuff like that, that will all differ from weapon to weapon, and we'll talk about this in the item section. But mobility here, dodge distance, dodge limit, and sprint speed are all kind of catered around your mobility if that weapon has it on here. So keep those things in mind. So what you want to do is hold down block and dodge left and right while you're dodge pushing. Now the caveat here is, of course, that this does not regenerate my stamina. Anytime you are dodging, blocking, or pushing, dodging, blocking will regenerate your stamina, but dodging, pushing, or actively blocking, if something's hitting you, it will not regenerate your stamina. And here's the difference between full stamina and pushing. See, I just rapid fire, and now that I've run out of stamina, it's a much slower push, so I cannot keep things away from me as easily. So you just want to make sure your stamina is regenerating. You're not just constantly spamming this and kind of putting yourself in a bad position because you can't dodge as well with that low stamina. I'm barely pushing versus letting that go all the way up. Kind of corralling these guys into a nice kind of circle how I want them to wind up for a slash. And that's kind of what you really want to make sure you're doing, is using that block, using that push as best you can. Now the follow-up to blocking and pushing and dodging is the block attack of holding down right click, holding down left click, and letting him do this. This will keep you alive far more than just doing this. I'm just going to swing at everything and hope I just make my way to victory. This will get you only so far. This is really the way you want to do combat. Now keep in mind though, block push attacking also will not let your stamina regenerate. So you have to find ways to kind of cater and pace yourself with the blocking, with the dodging, with the block push attacking, so that you maximize your stamina and keep yourself alive. Dodging out of the way as much as you can, keeping your block up and pushing things away from you is really the way that you keep yourself alive in this game. I cannot stress upon it enough, because once you get into difficulties, especially just 3 is not too hard of a difficulty, but you will find that you will take a considerable amount of damage very fast if you do not keep your block up and keeping things corralled and away from you, so that you can actually line them up for a proper hit. Now that we know how to dodge things, let's talk about weak spots and armor locations. So when you look at every single unit in the game, or every monster in the game, for the most part they have got armor in differing spots, and this is reflected upon how you hit them. The hitbox will then determine what armors you're hitting, with carapace armor being the highest rating armor, and then unarmored of course being the lowest rating. So let's go ahead and just swing at this guy. I'm in the Psychinetic, so that tells me it says unarmored, where if I hit this guy, well, that guy's got flak armor. And even a heavily armored something like a Mauler at the top, he has carapace armor, which vastly reduces the amount of damage I can do. Now, when we talk about the item screen, you'll see the breakout of the damage per second and damage and stagger of what it will do for each and everything, for every combo attack and all that action. Again, we'll talk about it in the item section. But it's worth noting that this Mauler does not have carapace armor everywhere. Flak armor, flak armor, flak armor. So his arms are exposed, but his chest and his head are carapace. Just keep these things in mind, because it's important on how you're going to be doing damage with your melee and your range weapons, and how you're going to want to change that hit. Also, you have a weak spot. So the head on this guy is a weak spot. It's telling me right there, that's a weak spot. That's a weak spot. So trying to aim for the weak spot on things is huge, and getting a critical hit on that weak spot is even bigger. So keep this stuff in mind. If you have a chain weapon, you can rev and do a ton more damage even through flak and carapace armor. Or if you have a force sword, or if you have a power sword, those things will do more damage to those armored things. Having high penetration on an axe or anything of the sort will give you that amount of that ability to actually do more damage into those armored locations. Keep in mind too that shields will completely negate your damage, which we'll talk about in hit indicators, which we're about to get into. But I just wanted to bring up that every single unit that does have armor will have armor in special locations, so you can kind of time or place your swings, which will be different from every weapon and every location, into those kind of weaker points. So the last thing I want to talk about now is your hit indicators, which are pretty straightforward, but just kind of worth noting here. If I go ahead and just hit anything, a little white blip right there will tell me that I hit it, not a big deal. If I were to kill something, I get that red blip there telling me, okay, those red crosshairs, I've killed something. That's going to be particularly useful if I'm firing at ranged here, like this guy right there. Oops, missing him too. Okay, I'm firing at range. I know I actually hit and killed that person. That's good to know if I'm playing maybe a Psyker or a Sharpshooter. Just getting those context clues is pretty huge. Now, you do have some other hit indicators though. One being a blue indicator. Now, it's best exemplified here on the shield. Now, this completely negates damage. Anytime you see that blue, no damage was done. Shooting the back of an ally, sometimes that gives you that blue one because no damage was done. If you have a weapon and you go to stagger them, no damage will be done. Sometimes this one will do a little bit of damage here. But certain weapons with lower power or whatever it is, staggering them will just give you those blue marks telling you, hey, you didn't do any damage. Anytime you see that or if you have no penetration on a specific weapon, you attack something and you can't pierce through their armor at all because there's 0 penetration, that blue means that that is what's going on. No damage is done. Allies, staggering, shields, whatever it is. Now your last indicator is a yellow one. And that is when you hit a weak spot. Now there is an evolution here. It's kind of like an orangish yellow, more of a gold, because then a more bright yellow is when you get a critical hit in a weak spot. And you'll hear a whoosh when that happens. So I'm going to swing on his head a bunch of times until we get a critical hit. I'm just going to kill him. There you go. That whoosh and the bigger, brighter yellow tells us we'd get a critical hit in that weak spot. And this will all come around once we talk about items just a second here to get more information. With the discussion about items, I had actually intended for this to be a much different style of conversation because the game did not have this level of transparency during the pre-order beta. But now we can see so much transparency on the items as to what everything does, but you might still be confused, so let me help you out. We're going to go ahead and press V on this Eviscerator, which is an amazing weapon, and then we're going to talk about some things. Now, every single item will have two words that are kind of appointed to the item as part of like, hey, this is what it does. Like strike down and armor piercing, unstoppable and ravage. And when we press V, it gives us what that is. Unstoppable, a heavy charge attack mode, slow to set up, but resulting in a devastating hit. And ravage, this weapon's razor sharp teeth are propelled by a powerful motor, allowing it to tear through flesh and armor with equal ease. It's kind of just like context tips onto how that weapon works. But you're probably wondering, what does item rating do? And maybe you're coming from Destiny or whatever it is. Well, some of the the best way to kind of look at this is your item rating is a currency that the item uses to allocate to these sliders down here. You can see it says base rating, a weapon's quality rating based off of its statistics. So of that 345, 290 points are being appointed to this. And it shows you how that spread kind of works its way out. There's so much transparency that was not here before this video that is just amazing here, right? So it shows you, okay, mobility is going to help out with your sprint speed, your dodge distance, your dodge limit. Your penetration here is light attack and heavy attack damage versus flak and carapace armor. And we're going to talk about that, of course, in the combat section, or we've already talked about it. But you can see 290 is not 345. Well, 35 points of that 345 and 20 points of that 345 are allocated to this, which is like a trait, and this, which is called a blessing. Anytime you see one of these icons, that is a blessing on an item that you can edit, of course, in crafting. All this can be edited in crafting. And it's important to note, too, these little hash marks. This is basically the intensity of the blessing. I think I might have one with a... Yeah, so this one's got 3 little hash marks right here, and that means that it's a blessing with more on it. The 4% power for 3.5 seconds on hit, maybe 2 hash marks just says 3.5% power, whatever it is. And if I look at, maybe I have another weapon here to kind of show off some more. Unfortunately, don't have any with the same exact one, but still, these hash marks kind of denote certain things. So it's important to kind of take a look at these things, because when you also look over here at your attack chains, you get what the light attack and what the heavy attack does, what pressing just left click or holding left click does. And you get an idea of strike down, a powerful attack targeting one enemy, vanguard, wide attack damaging many enemies at once, and then you've got a bunch of different variations here. And I can press tab to then give me detailed breakouts, man, this is so sick, of each place I'm hitting, the body, the weak spot, a critical weak spot, all this stuff and what it does. Okay, if I'm doing just an attack on an unarmored body, I'm going to be doing 194 versus this. A maniac with critical weak spot is going to be 165 with 13. Now that little lightning bolt, that's the stagger damage that you're doing, or the stagger it's going to do versus the damage it's going to do. So you have those little bits right there. Then every single weapon will have a special action, and that special action will differ from weapon to weapon. We switch screens here, but you can see this one activates power up the weapon for a stronger attack. This will rev the chainsword, and you'll just kind of carve through things. So pretty much all the information you need to know is now very transparent and very present to you. Again, in the past, this was not the case. So if you see any videos that kind of give you breakouts of how the item system works in the game, we now have way more transparency on that. So don't be confused by those older videos, my own included, because we have just so much more to go through. But there are some things I want to talk about with this further into the Curios portion of the game. So Curios are these 3 little slots here at the bottom. Now, they're very important because they give you additional ways to survive the tumult of the ladder difficulties in the game. And trust me, you will be dealing with a lot of trouble jumping from difficulty to difficulty. It's quite the curve from difficulty 2 into 3, from 3 into 4, from 4 into 5, good lord. Now, you look at these and they'll say stuff like wounds, and again, you're taking the allocation of the rating for these individual blessings and perks. And this is the symbol for blessings on the Curios. I don't know why it's something different, but it is what it is. Now, wounds are, of course, those little bars in the lower left corner of your health bar whenever you jump into a mission. Each one of those little, bars is a wound, and in the higher difficulties you actually have less wounds. So using these Curios is really going to be helpful in those latter difficulties. But when you're just starting out, you won't get access to Curios, I think, until level 10. And when in that case, try and find Curios that have a perk that's say +2 experience. That way you get through those early levels as quick as possible. But outside of that, I would really look for anything that gives an increase to your toughness. While damage is important in this game, I find that survivability is far more important. And an increase in wounds is nice because if you have just one wound bubble left or one wound bar left and you get downed, quote unquote, then your character dies outright and people have to go and rescue you. So this can be a really great way to get a little bit more out of your character if they're getting repeatedly downed, while at the same time toughness is a resource that is unlimited in that it will always regenerate for yourself versus health is finite. So I don't find health to be as good of a blessing for your Curios. Make sure you're looking for either toughness or wounds depending upon the way that you're playing your character. If you're struggling with wounds, go with wounds. If you just really can't keep your toughness up, go with toughness. I default to toughness, but I also have the highest level item rating thing I can. Now, it is also kind of worth noting here as a last kind of thing for item rating that if you're noticing your store is stagnating in the sense that you go to the store and you're always dealing with the same amount of item rating on your items, you need to start buying item ratings that are higher than what you've got, even if you don't plan on using the item. An example here would be this 401 item rating bolt gun. Now, I'm definitely using that. I'm definitely using that. But if I wanted to help try and push my item rating available in the store up, you do this by buying the highest item rating for each individual weapon that you can when available with each market refresh. That's so much to consume, but basically what I'm saying here is just make sure you have the max item level for each weapon slot. So okay, 401, and you don't need to have it equipped, it just needs to be in your inventory. So 401, okay, I've got that guy covered. Okay, 399. See, I'm not using this axe, but the axe is present in my inventory to push the overall item level that is available to me in both the limited time store and in the store that refreshes every hour. So these things are pretty crucial, and the same thing applies to your Curios. Just make sure you are pushing your item rating up so that you can maximize the best possible items to come your way. Now, a lot of people kind of think that, and this is just, take this with a grain of salt, we have not tested this, there's no established meta, have fun with the game as much as best you can, but apparently the best way to kind of go with things is to get a really high item rating gray weapon like this, a profane weapon, and then push it through the upgrade process, because then you're not wasting any points on perks and blessings, and it allows you to then put those perks and blessings on it once it's allocated the majority of its modifiers to this. I again, take that with a grain of salt. I don't think it's actually going to be the way things are with this new system, but it's worth kind of just talking about very quickly. Let's jump really quick now into crafting before closing out our item section. Now, with the crafting section, there are certain portions that are not available as of the launch of the game. We've got Consecrate here, which is going to increase the item rating. It's simply pressing this button. You can see it's going to take it from profane to redeemed, and the item rating is going to go from 309 to 319 to 334. And this is a great way to help you kind of allocate better things into the gun. Like I said, people were saying that the best way to do this is by just going from a gray to like an orange to get the most out of it. But you can see here now that Fat Shark has added perks that will automatically allocate to the weapon. But keep in mind that doing this does cost these special resources, plasteel, and I don't remember the name of this one, which you'll find in the missions as you play through them. Eventually you'll be able to refine the items, swapping off the individual perks, and you'll be able to earn a blessing if it doesn't have one, or re-bless it, swapping the blessing out. So we don't have access to those, but I just wanted to quickly touch on crafting. In my personal opinion, crafting is not worth touching until the very latter portions of the game. You can really, if you absolutely want to, start bringing up a specific gun all the way to the top for you. Like, for example, this is a pretty good bolt gun, but if I look at this one, it's got way higher stability. Maybe I just want to take this one as high as I can and just keep increasing its item rating. Stability for me on bolt guns is everything. And it is also worth noting too that consecrating this, even pushing it from blue to purple, does still add another perk. So these are some things to kind of take a look at. I wanted to cover crafting really loosely in this section because, like I said, when you're just starting out, just don't worry about it. Play the game, have fun. There's no reason to min-max when it comes to the crafting portion because so much of it is not even unlocked in this portion of the game, in this iteration of the game just yet. But again, just worth talking about. For a quick conversation on your feats, it's important to note that there is no real set meta, as I've said, so playing in the beginning of the game, just try all the feats out, especially when you're in the earliest difficulties. It's not going to matter as much. In the latter difficulties, it will definitely be huge, but if you play through, you learn the class by trying out all the feats, reading them, and understanding how they kind of play into your gameplay style. You're going to be way better off in the max levels because you'll already know how your feats work. The really big things that you should be focusing on are your aura and how it affects you and your team, because mine, for example, it gives toughness, damage reduction for allies, and coherency, and your iconic abilities, which give you context clues on how to best execute certain things for your class. For example, here, melee attack speed, or damage for having low health, or this one that has basically makes me extremely tanky when I'm about to die because I'm invulnerable for 5 seconds. But maybe you're playing the veteran Sharpshooter who gets a bonus damage to weak spot hits, telling you, okay, make sure I'm getting these headshots in. And a lot of your feats won't really take off until 20, 25, 30, especially if you're playing Psyker, when those 3 feats really kind of weigh into your 5, 10, 15 feats. So just play the class however you want. Don't worry about min-maxing on your way to the top. Just learn the class to your best of your ability so that once you get to your max level, you are really off to a solid start. And any build guides or anything like that are just going to tweak knowledge you already know. The last big subject I want to talk about for the beginner's guide portion of this video is off of the mission difficulty and the XP grind. When you're first starting off, just play the difficulty 1. And maybe difficulty 2 once you can get yourself to that point. Don't push into difficulty 3 or 4 quickly because it's a very harsh difficulty curve once you hit from 2 to 3. And on top of that too, looking for missions that say assassination are probably the most straightforward because I don't think there's actually any up here. Yeah, there's no real any assassination. Oh, here's one. Because you just simply have to kill one target, and it's a pretty easy thing to do, especially considering the fact that if you're not playing with a bunch of friends, it's the most succinct thing to do with a bunch of random people that sometimes are a little bit harder to corral together. Now, with each increase here, you'll see an increase in the money you get and the increase in the the experience you get at the end of the mission. You can see that goes up a little bit here into 2, and a little bit more here into 3. And pretty significantly once you jump into stuff like, I don't think there's a 4 up here. There's not. A 4 and then a 5, which is monstrous. That's how you're going to get a lot of your money. But with these little additional modifiers, these secondary objectives, when you're in the initial portions of the game, don't worry about them so much, especially grimoires, because grimoires will give you corruption, and corruption is that purple stuff that goes on your health bar that reduces your overall max health, and you cannot purge it unless you remove the grimoire. You do get additional experience in gold, but it's just not worth it, especially even ones that say scriptures. Unless you're doing it for a weekly, which we're about to talk about, it's not worth it. You can get additional experience in gold, but to put yourself out of the way to go and get them, if you're just starting off, don't even worry about them. But do keep in mind for modifiers like this, high intensity engagement zone, these things will have special conditions, stuff like endless horde, where you're just dealing with tons and tons and tons of things coming your way. This one's telling us that you have a higher portion of specialists. So trying to find missions with fewer hordes or missions without modifiers are going to be great ways for you to grind some early experience, sticking with difficulty 1, if not 2, once you can handle it, and then once you can eventually stomach 3, jump into 3. Hold off on 4 or 5 until you really have a good group, or you have a good high-level character that you're just trying to grind out some money. But I think 2 or 3 is really the sweet spot, depending upon your level and your overall item rating. So moving forward out of the beginner stages of the game, once you hit a level 11, I believe it is, you get Sire Melk's Requisitorium. Now, it's really important that you take a look at the view contracts portion and do all of these, if not recycling them by pressing replace task. You press this button and it says the first time it costs you nothing, which is great, but then this will increase more and more and more in cost every time. So make sure that you are really taking advantage of these, because this is going to be probably the currency that you'll be using for a lot of endgame progression. Now, I say probably because we still don't really know how that's going to shake itself out. And this kind of comes back to what we were saying about the item store, right? Making sure that you purchase the best items you possibly can for the limited time acquisitions, because these are all exalted. They're all purple items. Now, these will also sometimes be orange items. So this is a really great way to get really strong weapons at really high item rating. Again, at 431, that I think is 30 more than the highest item rating weapon or curio that I have. Well, curios can't be that high. That's still my point. It is really worth pushing your item rating by buying things on the other market or on this market as much as you can. Mystery acquisitions, I really wouldn't worry about as much, because it's just too much of a gamble with how much of a cost it is compared to how you're getting these little tokens. So just kind of keep that stuff in mind when you are looking at it, because it is going to be very important to your progression in the game. And a closing point here on the weekly contracts is that it is party-wide. It's not individual. So you don't individually need to kill 750 dregs with melee. The entire party contributes towards this. So as you jump from mission to mission, anytime that range kills against scabs or dregs are happening, that is contributed towards you, even if you are not the one doing it. That's a huge portion of this, and it makes it seem a lot more achievable and a lot less daunting. Another portion of the beyond the beginner stages of the game are your penances. So you're going to go ahead and press escape. You're going to go to penances. You're going to go to your class and choose whatever class you've got. I'm a preacher, so this is my preacher class. So make sure you're looking at some of these to see if you can get them done in your missions. I have a whole guide on how to do them linked in the upper right corner. Some of them are easy, some of them are not so easy. But this is how you get access to a lot of really cool cosmetics. In the beginning portion of the game, they're not going to be as apparent to you, but these two right here are difficulty agnostic, meaning you don't need to be on a very specific one. Like this one says, complete a full mission on Malice Threat or higher without firing a shot. Whereas these two just say while dashing or using a stun grenade. So take a look at your individual penances. Make sure you can knock these out. Get yourself some cool cosmetics that you can use on your character. Give yourself a little bit of that drip, but it is a big portion of the game, and it's something that I think that a lot of people miss in the early portions and don't even realize it's there until much later. And at that, it brings our video here to a close. So there are a lot of things in Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. Maybe some things even in this video I didn't hit on 100%. And if you are a veteran of the good fight, go ahead and let it be known in the comment section below some big tips that helped you get through the early portions of the game. Their game has already changed so much from the initial betas into the pre-order beta into the live game. So there's a lot of stuff. People are learning everything, and it's a lot of fun and a very exciting portion of the game right now. So if you find yourself struggling, that's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. The game is very difficult. It's extremely punishing once you hit the higher difficulties, and it really requires you to learn your class, learn the geography of the map, how to move around corners and force line of sight, all these things. But once you now kind of make your way through this initial portion, hopefully it'll help you out in breaking and cracking into Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, which in my opinion is probably one of the best Warhammer 40k games next to like Dawn of War 1 or Space Marine. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. We do have a really fun, exciting live stream going up tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. Pacific Daytime. We'll all be doing a game giveaway, giving away a bunch of other stuff. So come on and head on over to that stream on both Twitch and YouTube. Twitch is Italian Spartacus. YouTube as well. It's this right here. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.